Francesca Di Mottola, you're the production designer for The Great, which recently returned for its third season. First off, how does the season start for you and your department? Like, do you get the scripts first, or do you have conversations with Tony McNamara about what the season will need? What happens at the start?
Absolutely. So we start having conversations often quite early on, and Tony doesn't necessarily have it all planned out from the beginning. So he has an idea where the season might go, and he just throws some ideas at me, and which usually, I mean, it's happened for season 2 and specifically season 3, where I get sort of very excited and sort of start dreaming up new builds and new spaces, and sort of it's quite a funny process, because then I go back to him and sort of sell back his own ideas in the shape of spaces. And sometimes he's already moved away onto a new idea, and I sort of have to then, follow him. And so it happened with season 3, where I sort of was very excited about the idea of just building a whole new wing of the palace, where Catherine and Peter sort of get together in this season after going through a lot of turmoil and trying to kill each other. Catherine trying to kill Peter at the end of season 2. They're sort of together, and they're not happy in each other's apartments because of the history that they carry. And so we sort of ended up creating a new apartment, but the way we got there was through a lot of conversations and me pitching crazy ideas, where Peter was like this crazy decorator, whilst Catherine was sort of focused on reigning. And so it's all sort of coming from his ideas, and then it goes somewhere, and then it sort of reigns back and becomes something else. That often happens.
And the relationship between Catherine and Peter is, of course, quite turbulent, to say the least. How do you try to reflect that in the design of that space they share all of a sudden?
Yeah, so the point is exactly that. They didn't share a space, so they each had a wing since season 1. We established that sort of Peter goes and visit Catherine. Catherine sort of goes into his bedchambers. And therefore, I think I sort of tried to enhance that it's in the dialogue, and it's in the scripts, the fact that they sort of talk about being not completely happy in each other's space. And Catherine, in the beginning of season 3, in the first episode, they're both waking up from where we left them in season 2, sleeping in Peter's bed. They both have a sort of a knife under the pillow. So they're clearly like sort of not trusting each other. And that space comes with sort of trauma from what happened there. And then they sort of move into Catherine's bed, and in the design, her original bedroom was a chinoiserie wallpaper with lots of birds and beautiful hand-painted trees, and we just added birds to that wallpaper because Peter speaks of his trauma of being closed in a cage, not in a cage, in a bird cage by his mum. And so he has trauma of birds, and he can't be in that space. So they then move into a new wing of the apartment, which used to be his dad's wing. And finally they find some balance in that space because it doesn't belong to either of them. However, Peter then there's a whole storyline that opens up with them moving into this old apartment because he starts being chased by his dad's ghost. So that was a storyline that was fun to explore, which is why it didn't really work for them to sort of build their own apartment together. We need a sort of history of what these spaces could mean for Peter. And so, it propels the story forward.
And how many other new builds did you have to create for season 3?
Yeah, quite. So as part of Peter the Great's apartment, it's a whole wing. So what we do see of this wing is the bedroom, which is like a whole apartment itself, composed by this big sitting room, a bedroom, and a study, which becomes Peter the Great's study, becomes Catherine's study. And then it opens up into what we call the games room. And so it's this sort of quite giant space, a big hall essentially, where again, it was a space that had been closed for years, and that they sort of restore and open up through a big dance scene, and that's where they have I mean, they do lots of things in this season in this one space, from having like your classical Russian sauna to playing badminton to having all sorts of games in that space. So that was one big build that we really enjoyed, specifically creating for this season.
The show takes liberties with history. It very much plays around with history. Were there new references and inspirations that you brought into the season from around the world and across time periods that were new this season?
Yeah, I think it's when we're sort of confronted with the scripts and the idea of new spaces. It's just so open. There's no, most of the time, it's like, it's really what we want to tell with what we want the space to tell or to sort of add to the story. So the research is so broad. And I was just looking at a number of palaces, and I can't even start, I think that the Royal Palace in Stockholm was a great source of inspiration for Peter the Great's bedroom, just because the royal bedroom in that palace, there was one specific bedroom where I just thought the way the room was divided and the colors and the tones was so perfect for us. But I stumbled across that image, and yeah, so I don't know, it's really very open to the point where you need to, like, I have to find myself a place and a time to stop looking for references and images. And yeah, I guess yeah, some palaces in Germany were also the source of inspiration for new salons we created. So it is really open for, for the research to go in so many different ways. And even for the games room, I was looking at a specific palace in Italy called Palazzo Te, which just had the most beautiful frescoes and the paintings of these wonderful, enormous horses by Giulio Romano, which I reproduced on the walls of the games room, because the games room is also where Peter spends most of his time trying to create the perfect European horse. So he brings in the two perfect horses and is desperately trying to have them mate. So in this space, and it's just so open to fun research. And it's difficult to say where I start. I guess it's somewhere of architecture and art history references that I know from, my upbringing, and then I sort of space out and yeah, rain it all in at some point. I hope it makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm just struck always by how ornate and just detailed all the imagery is. Like, what's the process of creating, gathering, props, decorations, artwork? Like, what is that process like?
Yeah, so specifically going back to the new apartments, the actual architecture and the build is ornate to a point that when we found ourselves dressing it, we just needed almost minimal dressing, because there's so much that is going on the walls, like from patterns to pilasters. There's like 50 pilasters ornate the walls of that bedroom, and the pilasters themselves are decorated by sculptural elements, and then which took us a really long time to sort of find the right balance for how ornate we could go. And I just wanted more and more, and at one point it was so ornate to the point that it kind of became kitsch and ugly, and that's when I knew it was right. And so with the dressing, we sort of had to rein it back a bit, and it's just it's a very organic process, the way I work with the other sort of heads within my department, the set decorator, the prop makers, the scenic painters. Everyone sort of brings something to it. So the new apartment has this, I think, really beautifully executed bas relief of Peter the Great on a bear, and that was sculpted by one of our sculptors and painted bronze, and then it gets changed because they try to sort of make the room more theirs and get rid of the presence of Peter the Great. And so they bring in a portrait, a family portrait, where Catherine is standing up holding the globe, and Peter's the one sitting down on a chair actually holding their baby. So there's always this play with their roles being sort of she being the one who's reigning and Peter being the man who's taking care of their baby, the dad at home, and sort of a little bit bored with his day-by-day routine. So he's inventing flavored salt and whatnot. So there's a lot of play with their couple marital balance, which is fun to sort of how what design can bring to it, and that goes from the designing of food, the designing of specific props. So it sort of permeates everything.
Well, congratulations on your work on the show throughout the years, and particularly in season 3. And thank you so much for talking with me about it. We will talk to you again soon.